Hey everybody, Eric Dorward here with the Spartan Rocketry Club, and I am starting a new build today. I do have a rocket here to show you. This is one of my earlier builds, and it's not particularly good, but I do use it from time to time in class, actually, as an exemplar, because it's a scale model. It happens to be a scale model of a sounding rocket. This is a Nike Smoke, and it's delightful and all. But the new one that I'm going to be building is a slightly larger version of this. This is an 18 millimeter model. It's still available. Yeah, here's the nose cone of the upscale. It is essentially the same size as the entire 18 millimeter powered rocket. So this is going to be mid-powered, a big boy, as it were. So I'm excited to get going with this. As you can see, yeah, this is pretty serious. It does have this nice through the fin or through the wall fin construction, so it should be a fairly easy-ish build, at least with regard to a lot of the construction. Now, because it's so big and it's going to be using mid-power motors, I'm going to be using more advanced construction on it instead of just glue. But hopefully the construction part won't take terribly long. So let's get down to it. In looking at this, I think the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I get rid of, oh boy, I'm going to get rid of this part right here so I can actually use this later. So I'm going to just cut through, and I am cutting toward the nose cone here as best as I can. And my hands are well away from everything that, every place that I'm going to be using the blade. This is pretty thick plastic, so it's going to take a few passes here before I get this cut enough so that I can actually punch it out. And again, this is definitely a place to take your time. This hand over here is so far away from the blade, I'm not too concerned about taking the time to put the glove, my nice cut-proof glove, on. But, you know, it's not a bad idea. At least be safe and cut away from your hand if you're going to do this. Alright. So it looks like I've punched through this way. And now I'm going to have to just cut the other directions to get this eye cleared. Just take a few passes at it. And there's no rush to this. And again, as I said, this is pretty thick plastic, so don't expect that this is just going to pop right out, because it's not. Right. And typically when you're doing this, you don't need to cut from both sides. But again, this is really thick, so I think that's probably going to be necessary in order to get this thing out. Alright, let's see how we did. I can see that I've cut through it in multiple places. I might be able to push it out at this point, or at least see where I need to still cut. It looks like this part right in here needs to still be, basically all the corners appear like they're not particularly cut clear. So I'm just going to carefully trace around the corners. And again, I expect that I'm probably not actually going to cut through everywhere there's a corner here. I'm probably going to end up just kind of shearing it loose at some point, just kind of popping it out. Yeah, I am definitely making progress. Got a lot of little plastic shards that are coming out, which is fine, I guess. Just need to make sure I clean that up afterwards. Okay. Let's go back to this side and see what needs to be done here. looks like, there we go. Yep. Perfect. Lovely. Moving on. So that takes care of at least I think all I need to be cutting today. I probably, I'm going to have a look at this. I might need to sand it. It actually looks pretty smooth considering what I was doing to it. So I might end up having to sand that down a little bit. But for the time being, I think we're good with that. All right. So here are the instructions. I'm going to start in on, I think I'm going to put the fins together. This is going to be somewhat, I tend to move haphazardly through the instructions. I frequently don't follow the exact order that the instructions say to follow, mostly for time more than anything else. And if you noticed, looking at the blown up diagram, the fins for this are actually plastic, which is honestly kind of surprising considering how big this kit is. But that'll actually potentially save us some time down the road. So the nice thing is the fins are all shaped. Like the shaping of the fins in the wooden model version of this is time consuming because you had to make this line and then get all the shaving part or sanding part right. It's not super fun. But in any event, these are all pre-made for us, so that makes life a little bit easier, and they're going to not exactly snap together, but pretty close. But of course, we don't want to just trust to the friction holding this together. We're actually going to glue this in place. So let's get to that. The instructions, of course, call for not wood glue here, but CA. That would be crazy glue. I suppose you could use epoxy. I suppose you could use plastic cement, I guess, but I'm not going to do that. Notice here the instructions are telling us too exactly where we're going to be putting the glue. So yeah, it doesn't, you don't need to glue every possible thing. Basically what I'm going to do is, the short version of what the instructions say is on this one, there's a seam in here, so I'm going to put glue inside the seam. And that's the major one. It does want me to put glue along this X and also along basically the bottom of this too. My biggest concern here would be that I don't, when I squeeze this together, I really do not want to glue my hands together in the process. So wherever I'm gluing, I want to make sure that I don't have any excess glue flitting about here. So I'm going to put some glue in the seam, in this seam, and then I am going to put a lot less glue, but still glue nonetheless, along all the other places that the instructions seem to call for it. So along these diagonal bits, here and here and here, and let me just make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah, I want it on the outside too. I'm going to be a little careful about that, mostly so I don't end up, like I said, gluing my hands together when I have to hold this and squeeze it together. Alright, you could try to put this together flat. I don't honestly trust that all that much. So I'm going to pick it up, but just being careful about where everything's going to go. And then squeeze together. The nice thing is there's a little bump here that acts as kind of a guide, not to mention every place else where things fit together. And I did end up squeezing a little bit of glue out the sides there, so be careful about that. That was a concern of mine. It did happen. So I'm using this kind of nasty looking piece of paper towel that I keep around just to mop up wherever it came loose. And the interesting thing about this is I did not put any glue along the edges. Hopefully that won't be an issue, but yeah, I mean that's what the instructions asked me to do. So alright, this is going to go off to the side and just dry for a little bit. I don't think you need to watch me do the other three. That's basically the same. So we will press on. We'll see how far I can get with constructing the motor mount next, because that's our next big challenge. So there's the motor mount. The core of it anyway. To mount it inside the rocket, we've got some plywood, it looks like, centering rings. There's the third one. Parachute that out of the way. And we're going to need that. This is the engine retaining system. And then there are a couple other stray pieces that we'll need in order to do this. The rest of this stuff, and most of it, we won't need for a while. So away that goes. Alright, this is the engine block. Now, it would typically go in like this. The instructions say that this is an optional step. Now, if your intention is to only ever fly this with an Estes 29mm black powder motor, then I would put it in. The problem is we don't have, typically when we have a spacer like this, there is not a 29mm spacer in order to figure out how deep into the rocket this is going to go. So you'll actually have to use a 29mm motor to get it far enough in. Now, the instructions say that this is optional for reasons that include, if you're flying 29mm motors, you very well may not be using Estes black powder ones. You may be using any of a variety of composites. And, well, the most commonly used ones are reloadables, and they're like this big or so. But the reloadables can come in a variety of sizes, so they might be as long as this entire thing. They might be shorter. They tend to get held in from this end rather than need to be stopped by something inside the tube. So this part is going to be a little on the unnecessary side for me. Your mileage may vary, so I'm going to put that aside. This I will need later. First step in the instructions is actually to break out my nose cone. And we're going to take this, and we're going to kind of force it up the nose cone a bit. The idea here is that we're kind of loosening it up so that it can fit over, there we go, the engine mount. There we go. Because it doesn't quite fit otherwise. And the nose cone is actually, it's a cone, so it actually works quite well to kind of space that out. Anyway, so that fits, lovely. Next thing I need to do is I need to do some measuring, and I'm going to measure 3 1/4 inches and make a mark. Since that is kind of in the middle-ish, I'm going to put an arrow showing which direction I measured from. And then I need to take this one, the one that has all the notches in it. That's going to get glued into place at that line. This is actually a pretty loose fit, I have to say. I'm somewhat concerned about that, but actually I'm going to take it off since that's such a loose fit. So I'm going to put a little bit of glue here. The instructions basically just showing me tacking this in from both sides. I'm not going to do it that way because the fit is pretty loose. I'm going to put, let's get some of that wood glue off. I'm going to put some glue behind, farther up the tube, and I'm going to slide it in place, and hopefully that'll get me a slightly better fit. That wasn't very accurate. I did not do that particularly well. I'm actually going to slide it this way then, to try to go through some of that glue that I put in the wrong place. Alright. That is pretty loose. I'm surprised that that's that loose. Alright, well, that's fine. I needed to tack this in anyway, so let's do that now. This is essentially just making a big fillet. And it is wobbling, oh my goodness, all over the place, and I'm kind of bumping it as I'm trying to do this, so that's no good. I have to say I'm a bit concerned that this doesn't fit as tightly as it could. That's not the world's greatest sign here. I am, my goodness, eventually, right, so I'm not going to use just wood glue to hold this in place. This will do, at least for the time being. But ultimately, I'm going to reinforce all this stuff with epoxy, because this is a kit that is big enough and heavy enough that it could take heavier motor from my stash. So not just an Estes black powder, but a composite and maybe a 29 millimeter composite. The reloadable ones that are available to the general public go up to G's, and the G's, the maximum thrust number, although it's not actual maximum thrust usually, goes up to say like 79. I've never actually flown a G79 because I don't really have the kind of the field availability for that. But this seems like a rocket that might actually be able to take that kind of abuse, and it's going to be heavy enough that I might actually get it back on a side like that. Alright, so I am not pleased with this at all, I gotta say. It's so sloppy, it's so loose. But unfortunately, there's not a whole lot I can do about that. It's going to have to get built up rather than, it's too tight, so I'm going to have to shave it down. So I'm going to remeasure this. Remember, I wanted this to be 3 1/4 inches. And it's at 3 1/4. And this actually matters, right? Because this is going to go inside the slot. I think this is as far as I'm going to get in this first video. I need this to set up, and it is not even close to being perpendicular. Yeah, so this is just going to have to rest, I think. And while it's resting, I'll do the other fins, put them together, and hopefully everything will be tacked up enough so that I can attach these other ones, which are also pretty loose, in the next video. Alright, so I'm going to just stand this up. Hopefully it doesn't decide it wants to just slide on down. That would be pretty rotten too. But that's it for now. Alright, thanks for watching. I will see you next time.